All right, everyone, as you're trickling in, welcome to the Myeloma Financial Coach chapter. We're really glad that you're here today. My name is Audrey Burton-Bethke, and I'm the Myeloma Crowd Community Manager. This program is brought to you by the Myeloma Crowd Community by HealthTree. Today's session is going to be recorded. The recording, along with the slides, will be sent out to all registrants 24 to 48 hours after this event has concluded. I'd like to begin by thanking our sponsors, without whom this would not be possible: Bristol Myers Squibb, Amgen Oncology, Karyopharm Therapeutics, AbbVie, Adaptive Biotechnologies, Genentech, Oncopeptides, and Takeda Oncology. I'd now like to introduce to you our featured speaker, Diahanna Vallentine. Diahanna is a myeloma coach who specializes in financial help for multiple myeloma patients and caregivers. As a professional financial consultant and former caregiver of her husband, who is diagnosed with multiple myeloma, Diahanna perfectly understands the financial issues facing myeloma patients and their families. Diahanna, I'm going to turn the time over to you to introduce today's topic and why you chose it. And then after that, Diahanna is going to jump into an amazing and informative presentation. So take it away, Diahanna.
Thank you, Audrey. I think a lot of people are inundated right now with clinical trials, especially with the COVID vaccine. And additionally, you may find some other opportunities coming up or other subjects matter that's going to be really hit on hard with people with immune systems where their vaccines may not be working as well as it would have been hoped. So I thought it was a great time to talk about clinical trials, how you can find those clinical trials that may be appropriate for you, according to you and your doctor, and how you can actually prepare for them, apply for them, and hopefully participate in them. In addition, we're going to talk about some of the out-of-pocket costs that you may encounter on your journey. So with that, that's why I decided to do this: clinical trials, how to find them and how to find help for your out-of-pocket expense. So there are seven different types of clinical trials which are used depending on what the researchers are studying. There's treatment research, which generally involves an intervention such as medication, psychotherapy, new devices, or new approaches to surgery or radiation therapy. There's also prevention research, which looks for better ways to prevent disorders from developing or returning. Some of these studies preventions may include vitamins, medications, vaccines, like I spoke of earlier, minerals, or lifestyle changes. Then there's diagnostic research. These trials refer to the practice of looking for better ways to identify a particular disorder or condition. There's screening research, which aims to find the best ways to detect certain disorders or conditions. And in addition to that, we have quality research, which explores ways to improve comfort and the quality of life for individuals with a chronic illness. And we have genetic research, aims to improve prediction or disorders via gene identification and illness relation. It looks at how a person's genes make them more or less likely to develop a disorder. This research may lead to novel tailor-made treatments based on a patient's genetic makeup. And then there's epidemiological studies, which seek to identify a pattern and control of disorders in groups of people. So how do you find a clinical trial? There's generally 6 steps to finding them. Before we get into that, I want to let you know you need to prepare. There's a lot of preparation you need to do. So I would encourage you, when you start looking for trials or you're considering, already start gathering some of that information together so you'll know how to navigate and won't be at the last minute, find a trial and now you have to go back and get all these things, because it's going to require you getting a lot of your medical history together and all of those things, which means you have to work with your doctor's office as well. Some of the questions we ask that you need to ask are: what kind of cancer do you have? Where did it first start? What stage are you in? What kind of treatment have you had or have not had up to this date? Have you had any other cancers? What is your bone marrow function test results? And what are your liver and kidney function test results? Because there's a lot of criteria that's involved with every single clinical trial. Okay, the answers to these questions will help identify which clinical trials you may qualify for. So if you're considering joining a clinical trial, if your doctor hasn't suggested already, ask them if they think one may be appropriate for you. Some clinical trials are outpatient, which means you will not be admitted to the hospital overnight. Others may be inpatient, requiring you to stay one or more nights in the hospital or research center. Be sure to ask the researcher what their study requires and be aware of any additional costs that you may need to address before you actually sign up for that clinical trial. It's very important. Okay, steps to finding a clinical trial. Step one, like I said, gather details about your cancer. Compare this information with the criteria of any trial that interests you. These requirements are what you need in order to meet in order to participate in the trial. And step two, find the clinical trials. There are many lists of clinical trials that are taking place in the United States. Each one of them have their own specific protocol summary. Make a note of these trials via bookmark or print a copy for your reference. That way you can make notes and keep up with what you're doing. The protocol summary should explain the goal of the trial and describe which treatments will be tested. This summary should also list the locations where the trials will be taking place, because you'll find very few in your home state. So there may be travel and lodging involved. NCI, National Cancer Institute, supports the trials that are supported through the National Clinical Trials Network, the NCI Community Oncology Research Program, Experimental Therapeutics Clinical Trial Network. These trials are funded in full or in part by NCI, including trials taking place at NCI designated cancer centers, trials at the NCI Clinical Center in Bethesda, Maryland. I've spoken to several patients who've actually been there before. Okay, clinicaltrials.gov is part of the National Library of Medicine. It includes NCI trials as well as trials sponsored by pharmaceutical or biotech companies that may or may not be on the NCI lists. Cancer centers and clinics that conduct cancer clinical trials. Trials conducted by cancer centers include NCI designated cancer centers. Some of these trials may not be on the NCI list, so you may have to be in several different places to find all of the trials that are available. Clinical trial listing services. This list draws from trial lists that are available from the US government, NCI, and clinicaltrials.gov. But you need to be aware that they may not be updated regularly. You may have to register first before being able to obtain information about that particular trial. Cancer advocacy groups may have this list available for ongoing trials. So reach out to them. Cancer Society, there's quite a few out there. You might want to find out what trials are going on. Okay, take a good look at the trials that interest you. Get the details, then call and get specifics about the trial and the trial summary. The trial summary is going to give you all the information you need. Okay, look at the protocols for the trial, how you need to qualify physically, ask about trial objectives, review eligibility criteria, find out where the trial location is, and find out how long that trial is going to be. Maybe several weeks, several months. You need to find that out, because if there's travel involved, we're going to need to coordinate your care and the cost of that as well. Generally, you can participate in only one trial study at a time. Different trials have different criteria, so being excluded from one trial does not necessarily mean exclusion from another. Inclusion criteria may include age, stage of disease, your age, sex, genetic profile, family history, previous treatment, and whether or not you have someone with you that can accompany you to future visits. Because if you're in a trial and you may have some kind of sickness or illness or side effects, you need to have someone with you. Exclusion criteria may include factors such as specific health conditions or medications that can interfere with the treatment being used, or previous treatments you may have or have not had. Contact the team running the trial. It's very important. Contact them directly and speak with the trial coordinator. Don't ask to speak to the researcher, ask to speak to the coordinator. They're the ones who have the time and can answer all your questions. They can take questions to the doctor and follow up with you. A final decision will not be made until you have met with the doctor who is part of the trial. It is and be aware, it's entirely up to you to proceed after you've been accepted into the trial. You're not going to be forced or coerced or anything into a trial. That decision is all up to you. Step 5, ask questions. A list will be available for participants after the end of this. We're actually going to attach this to HealthTree in our resource department, and there's another list in there as well. Please go there. It will help you gather all the information you need and know what kind of questions to ask, so you can really dive into the details and find out what kind of trial you can participate in. Talk to your doctor about your decision. Discuss potential risks and benefits of all the treatment available to you. Review all of your options. Then make an appointment. Schedule with a team running the trial that you're interested in. Ask your doctor if they or another healthcare team member can contact the trial team on your behalf. The clinical team director may ask questions about your illness that your doctor may be best able to address. Again, don't forget to cover all of your bases about the risks and benefits of the trial versus standard cancer care. Your doctor will need to coordinate your care while you're in the study. So once you've identified a suitable trial and have decided to join, be aware of all the required documentation necessary. Be aware of time-critical requirements. You don't want to put in all this effort, find a trial you like, and then you don't get all the information you need in order to participate in it. So what happens in a trial? It's very interesting. A lot of people know there are trials, but not sure, how that process goes. So first, the study staff will explain the trial in detail and gather more information about you. Once you've had all your questions answered and agree to participate in the trial, you will sign an informed consent form. You are then screened to make sure you qualify for the trial. And that may be physiological tests, that may be psychological tests. There's a lot of things that are involved. If accepted into the trial, you will schedule a visit called a baseline visit. At this time, the researcher will conduct cognitive and or physical tests during this visit. This could be done over hours or even days. You are then assigned to a treatment or control group. You and your family members follow the trial procedures and report any issues or concerns back to the researchers. You may visit the research site at regularly scheduled times for new cognitive, physical, or other evaluation and discussions with staff. At these visits, the research team collects information about effects of the intervention and your safety and well-being. And it's very important, keep notes when you're not there at the center. Keep notes of everything you're feeling, everything that that's different, that's not normal for you, because they're going to need this information to follow you on your trial. You'll continue to see your regular physician for usual health care throughout the study. And those are costs, and we'll get into it later, that you're going to maintain. So now we're going to talk about paying for clinical trials. This is the big part. And there's an area in here we're going to go through, and I think that's where you're going to have most of your questions about who pays for and how old your insurance is that you currently have. So most people are surprised that clinical trials may have some out-of-pocket costs associated with them. And as a patient, what are you going to be responsible for? You don't have to pay the majority of clinical trial costs. The sponsor covers the cost of research, the data analyst, which encompasses most of the cost. And you may have to pay copay and payments towards your deductible if those are part of your insurance plan. Even if your insurance plans does cover your care while you're enrolled in a clinical trial, there are additional costs that may not be included in your coverage. Ask those questions of your trial sponsor. What insurance may not cover? Lab tests are needed for the sake of the trial rather than normal care are generally covered by the trial sponsor. So if you go every week or every 2 weeks and get labs, your normal routine care, and your doctor and the clinical sponsor, the trial researcher decided that needs to continue, then you're still going to be responsible just like normal for those lab costs. Travel costs and other expenses, you may be reimbursed for these costs through your sponsor. Ask them directly, because it may not be televised, if they will reimburse these costs. In addition, find out if there's any lodging, and we can look at those through other financial resources through like the American Cancer Society, Leukemia Lymphoma Society. Some of these things, people will take care of some of those lodging costs. Your copays and deductibles. If copays are part of your insurance plan, you may need to continue to pay them for your routine visits. However, check with your trial sponsor, see if they will help cover these costs. Now, each trial sponsor have their own protocols, have their own criteria, and have certain things they're going to pay for. So if you're going to be in a trial that's out of state and you may have to go back and forth numerous times, they may be willing to pick up the cost of some of the lodging, as well as for travel costs. So don't forget to include this. This could be a huge chunk of the cost for your trial that you may have to pay for if you didn't do your due diligence to find out. Your insurance must cover medically necessary routine care costs in clinical trials. The plan works exactly the same way it covers routine care costs outside of a clinical trial. The trial must be approved, which means to qualify, the trial must have a written protocol already approved by an institutional review board. Your care providers and hospitals must be in network. If you don't have if you don't have out of network coverage, the same coverage applies as if under your regular plan. So this is very critical. You don't want to go somewhere, have to be in hospital for the initial protocol, taking blood work, all this additional study, and then you have to go back and forth for the trial and find out it's out of network and it cannot be covered. A lot of times, if you talk to your insurance providers, there may be things they can do, and that's where it's very important for you, and not just for clinical trials, but in your entire continuum of care. Make sure you understand your insurance. Make sure you talk to that person. Keep a note of the person you spoke to, the time and date, and what they said. If they can send you any hard copies of what they said or they agreed to or didn't agree to them, have them send that to you. Because if you go back and find out that something could have been paid for, or if you have an appeal you need to put in, that is going to be some of your required documentation in order to do that appeal. Keep up with that information. It's invaluable. Grandfathered in insurance plans may not cover trial participation. Now, these are health plans that existed prior to the enactment of Healthcare Act or the Affordable Care Act in March 2010. They are not required to cover routine patient care costs in clinical trials. If a grandfather plan changes in certain ways, like more people sign up for it, or their costs increase above a certain amount, or your copays or deductibles increase above a high line marker, then it is no longer considered such a plan or grandfather plan, and then must follow the federal law, which means the federal law would be deferred then to the Affordable Care Act, and it could be paid for. But what I would suggest you do, if you have your own private insurance, and you're still working, that insurance has been around for a long time. Like mine is through Aetna. It was through Aetna retirement plan through my husband's employer, and I haven't changed that plan, and it's like a grandfathered in, and it could be a grandfathered in plan, then you need to call and find out if it's a grandfather plan. You don't want to have any surprise costs associated with participation in a trial. Check with your health plan if you are covered under an employer to make sure you know what plan you are in. It may make the difference in what the insurer will pay and what you will be required to pay out of pocket, and consequently will affect your ability to participate in the trial due to out-of-pocket associated costs. And those things can be high if you travel back and forth. Additionally, on December 11, 2020, the Department of Labor, Health and Human Resources, HHS, and the Treasury issued a new final rule to adjust current requirements that group plans and insurance must follow to maintain grandfathered status under the Affordable Health Care Act. This new rule enabled grandfathered group plans to impose higher cost sharing requirements without losing their status. Only a handful of Affordable Care Act provisions apply to grandfathered plans. So again, it's very important for you to check what kind of insurance plan you're in. They do not have to comply to most Affordable Care Act reforms, like covering essential health benefits or preventative services without cost sharing or capping annual out-of-pocket costs. So very important for you to find out what kind of insurance you have. Again, keep notes, keep notes, keep notes. Journaling for earlier trials, particularly phase 1 trials, these trials are potential treatments that are less understood than those in later phases, which means they have a higher risk. They have the pros and cons. They typically involve more risk than later stage trials and may not have yet been tested on humans, or may have been tested on very few volunteers. If you decide to do this, all risk will be explained to you. Later phase trials sometimes offer reimbursements for your trial, or more often for travel or childcare. These things are not always advertised, so it is wise to ask the study team every single study or trial you're considering applying to. Look at everything, the cost, the time, everything, because it's going to make a big difference whether you can participate in that trial or not. Ask the trial study team if others have had problems with insurance coverage. Here are some things you can do to collect and submit to your insurance carrier that will help you demonstrate why this clinical trial is good for you. Medical journal articles from prior studies that explain the potential benefit of the treatment, a letter from your doctor that explains the trial or why the trial is medically necessary for you, or a letter from an outside supporter groups of the trial, such as a patient advocacy group. All of these things can come into play with helping your insurance department decide, your insurance health plan, decide if they are going to cover cost. I know it's a lot to dive into, it's a lot of information. I would suggest you understand the type of trial you're interested in, take notes, take notes, take notes, ask questions. And it's also been said that the earlier you are in your disease, or if you have not had any treatment at all, maybe you have MGUS or something like that, that might be a really good time to participate in a trial. Again, you may go from one specialist to the other, and their treatment protocol or how they handle things are completely different. I would suggest you get second opinions on your trial with your doctor, and not just your oncologist, but also with your specialist. Your specialist may be aware of trials that your general oncologist do not have that information. So ask questions, take notes, document, document, document. Do your due diligence with your insurance provider. Huge. Don't forget to do that. Pull together your medical history. And I would encourage you, if you're involved in a HealthTree, a lot of people are in HealthTree through the myeloma HealthTree, do that, because a lot of information you're putting in there, you'll have it all gathered. You'll have it all together. And in fact, HealthTree can actually tell you what kind of trials that you may be eligible for. So it's another great resource for you to gather information, to understand your disease. I would suggest everyone out there to at least go in and look at it. There's people that can help you answer questions, how to put that information into HealthTree. They can help you with that. I would suggest you call that trial study, talk to the coordinator, and find out what information they're going to need, so you can start gathering that information and ask them about how long the trial is going to be, what's going to be involved, is it going to be in patient for part of the time or not. So you can be truly completely prepared, both physically and mentally, to take on such a challenge, because it can involve a lot of work, and but it can also provide some unbelievable outcomes. A list of questions to ask will be added to our HealthTree resource link provided by the National Institute of Health, as well as a cancer detailed checklist created by the National Cancer Institute to help you search, identify, and hopefully secure the trial that you can participate in. So I think right now, I think we'd like to do some question
Yeah,
and answer. I know that's a lot jammed in a short period of time, um, but I'm here to answer questions that you may have.
great. Thank you, Diana. And if you want to navigate, there you go. Turn it on your camera. Perfect.
Okay.
So, um, a- as we are waiting for questions to come in, I kind of have a question of my own, and that is, did your husband participate in a clinical trial?
Now that's a good question. My husband did participate in one. However, it wasn't related to myeloma. This was when they were treating him for the incorrect
Oh, yes.
diagnosis. And it did not help him at all.
Mm.
Later on, when he was in the hospital after stem cell treatment, they did want to put him in a trial, but again, ask questions. You don't want something to be brought on you immediately, like really quickly, and you haven't done any of your due diligence. And it was one of these trials where they're giving medications or certain kind of treatments, and you don't go to a particular facility to do that. Because there are trials that are done where you're taking medications and they're gathering information with that medication. You want to be aware of everything that goes in your mouth, goes in your arm, everything that's done to you, because we didn't find out till later that when at one point he was on life support, and then they wanted to do a trial on him during the life support, and I started asking questions. What is this trial? What does it do? When was it done? How many people participated? And what were the outcomes of the trial? And it was it was positioned to me as if it was a trial that had been done quite a while back, and there were quite a few participants. Then I find out it was a trial with only a few participants, and I
Mm,
think it was maybe something that some doctor was locally doing. I don't know. It was through a big medical center, so it took me kind of surprise. So I would suggest before you find yourself doing anything or someone signing off on something to be done to you, make sure that this is legitimate, make sure that it's something that you can participate in, and then
right.
get second opinions.
Yeah, that makes sense. So we have a question about what can foreign patients who are not insured in the US expect regarding access to clinical trials, reimbursement, out-of-pocket costs, etc. What would be your recommendations for those people who may not have clinical trial options in their own country?
Wow, that's very interesting because and it's very complicated because insurance is covered generally when you're in our country. I would suggest you. hmm, Look at the clinical trials and talk to that sponsor. They may know other trials that are going on. Like for instance, with this vaccine, there are trials going on all over the world, right? For these vaccines, there may be some similar things going on with some cancer treatments or myeloma treatment. I would suggest you talk to the trial sponsors. If you go on and you have an opportunity to look at some of them, call and talk to trial sponsors or the National Institute of Health or National Cancer Institute. They may be aware of things that are done outside of our country.
Great, thank you. And we always love to have people who are not from the US come to our events, so I'm glad you're here.
I am too.
Um, and um, follow-up question, I guess, that I have is, let's say that you weren't aware of these resources and you have had these out-of-pocket costs. Can it ever be reimbursed? Can it ever be backtracked? I guess is a different question.
This is where you need to keep documentation, especially if you contact your insurance company, they say they would pay. But then it also ask the sponsor of that trial what they're willing to pay. Before you go in, find out what the insurance is going to cover, get documentation of that, and then ask the plan sponsor what they're going to cover. Now, remember, um, you need to find out if it's not normally covered through your insurance, your healthcare provider, and it's going to be out of network, then there may be ways to get that approved. But you're going to have all the documentation. Like I said, a letter from the doctor, a letter from maybe, or information about the particular trial. Maybe the sponsors can help you with that. But if you find yourself have gone through the trial and you're having bills come in that you thought was going to be taken care of, that documentation you got ahead of time is going to help you with your appeal.
Okay, awesome. Another question, what as a financial advisor for myeloma in the myeloma crowd, have you worked with patients who are going through this that did go through a clinical trial and doing these out-of-pocket costs? Have you like had hands-on experience with that?
I have spoken to several people who've gone through clinical trials and and one person who's anticipating a clinical trial here in where I live here in Louisville, Kentucky. Um, as and it's just they're in a process of gathering information. Now, as far as have I haven't spoke to anyone who's actually gone through a clinical trial? No, I haven't. I have not s- run across anyone who's gone through a trial or has not shared that information with me.
Right, right. And that's what I was gonna say too, is sometimes it's not just like they don't disclose their entire life and entire treatment history to you when they're when they're
Right, right, right. And
um,
hopefully with this, with the topics we're coming up with this clinical trial information, it'll get prompt people to speak up, to ask questions, and find out, and even entertain the thought of getting in a clinical trial. A lot of times, people know there are trials out there, but it's a nebulous thought. It's just out there, and until you talk about it and find out what kind of options are available, then they may be more inclined or empowered to bring this topic up with their doctors.
well, interestingly enough, too, Jenny Alstrom, who's the founder of Myeloma Crowd by HealthTree, for people that don't know, her big thing is clinical trials accelerate myeloma research, which leads us to a cure. And there's really no way that this research can be done without the involvement of people in these trials. So it may seem scary, or it may seem new, um, or it may seem that you're just uninterested. But really, it's one of the greatest sacrifices you could do in order to help accelerate myeloma research and get us all closer to a cure. Not saying the cure is coming tomorrow, but how else are we going to get there? And so I
Exactly.
appreciate all of those who have participated in the past and all those who are willing to participate. Now, again, there are restrictions, there are requirements. If you've tried to make it into a trial and you can't, like, you're not a bad person. That's not at all what I'm saying, but I have a lot of admiration for those and gratitude for those who are participating in and creating and sponsoring these clinical trials. So another question is, should we expect similar costs for early access programs?
Hmm. Currently, I think that they're going to be comparable. I don't see anything coming down the pike that might say those things will change. Um, but you know how it is. Things can change on a dime when it comes, especially now in our economic and our environment right now. So I don't know.
What,
If I find of anything, of course, I will put that information out there for people.
and remind us what early access programs are.
Huh. Early access programs is when you can participate in something without it necessarily being approved through the FDA.
Gotcha.
And there's been a lot. The Obama um, team tried to bring this to light, and Biden at the time as vice president was very much in very positively fought for some of those things. Now, right now, because there's so where the country is inundated with so many other things financially, I think some of this stuff has been put online. I think there's going to put over to the side. I think that they're going to start looking at, and there's something that came through a couple of weeks ago about accelerated care. So I think it's going to be back on the plate here in the next few months. Um, but it's basically something where you can participate like how to say, a Hail Mary is what I've heard it referred to. Participate in a trial because you have no other options, and it's before it's actually approved through the FDA. Now that is my understanding of it. I am not as versed on that as I should be. Thank you for bringing that up, and I will get more information on that.
No, that's great. And we don't expect you to know everything, so you're doing great. Another thing that I wanted to point out, as we're waiting for more questions to come in, is on HealthTree Cure Hub, one of the greatest parts, I think, of the program platform, whatever you want to call it, is when you enter in your information of your treatment history and your status of the disease and your information. And of course, this is all private information that's never shared with, your name. It's always shared anonymously, if it ever does go to researchers. Anyway, point is, when you fill out this profile on HealthTree Cure Hub, you're able to receive not only recommendations from multiple myeloma specialists about what your treatment should be, but you also receive, and we've partnered with Spark Cures, you also receive personalized clinical trials for you. So what clinical trials are out there that are available to you that you qualify for? So you jump through the hoops of, do I qualify for this one? Do I qualify for this one? Of course, you have to be accurate in what you've posted into HealthTree Cure Hub. But it's one of the coolest features, I think, of HealthTree Cure Hub is being able to get this personalized list of clinical trials that are available for you.
I agree. I agree.
So a couple more questions. Is there any organization advocating for the reimbursement of the out-of-pocket costs by the sponsors? What would be your recommendation to those wanting to start the process?
Um, I understood the first part. The second part, start what process? The process of looking for a trial. I don't know of any sponsors that are looking that are offering reimbursement for this cost other than for travel and lodging and childcare. And some of the actual sponsors of the trials will participate in that. Now, what was referred to as how to start this process? You know, gathering the information, getting your medical
Yeah,
history.
I'd love some follow-up on that because they might be saying the process to start advocating for reimbursement.
Interesting, because you can there. What I would suggest is to start with a sponsor early on. If there's something that's a trial you're interested in, start asking questions. What can they reimburse? And they have actually um, had other people maybe in the same similar situation who may be out of network. They've been accepted into the trial. Their insurance will may participate in picking up some of the cost. But they may be able to direct you to other places that might help you with that some of the costs for the trials, because it's almost like a voluntary um, thing. It's not like you are going to the doctor and yes, we got to put you on this drug now, or we got to do this treatment. When you participate in a trial, it's all voluntary, and you know, insurance companies try to keep as much money as they can versus helping people. So you may have a challenge, but I would again encourage you to talk to your insurance company ahead of time, because um, and don't just talk to the person that you're going to get on the phone. That person who's in the call center, ask to speak to their supervisor, ask to speak to somebody who works in specialized treatment, and they may be able to give you some more answers with that. And your health insurance company, they know what's coming through to them all the time. And a sponsor, those two places, National Institute of Health, they can also tell you, give you some idea, direct you to place sponsors who can help you with reimbursement for out-of-pocket costs.
Great. Diana, in your personal opinion, why would you encourage people? I kind of shared my little spiel of what I think, but why would you encourage people to do clinical trials?
Oh, that's interesting. That is a loaded question.
It is.
And simply because it's very personal to you. Almost every clinical trial in this country has a shortage of people participating, especially people of color, older people participating in it, which means if we don't have enough people participating in those trials, people of color, minorities, people of certain age with other illnesses, maybe comorbidities, we will never get the kind of treatments we need. And I say that knowing full well how important it is, but also knowing how difficult it is as a person, knowing you're going to go through the unknown, right? It's an unknown world, unknown area of health. You don't know what's going to affect your body, your mind, everything. And so it's a very, I don't know if any one person can ask that for another person. In fact, my husband and I spoke about that, just doing a bone marrow transplant. And we went over the risk and reward with the doctor several times, got second opinions. And he kept saying, I know I'm okay now, and the best time to do a trial, and a trial is when you're as well as you can be at that point, and you can still participate. And he refused. He stood back and says, I'm not going to do it, and this is why. I feel like I know what this disease is. I know what it can do. I know what it may not do, or what it may do, or options that I have available to me now, but I'm just not going to do it. And at that point, it becomes, you can't argue with a person, because that is a belief, that is a strong belief system that they have, and that is because they have control over their thoughts, their body. Um, and so for me to say, it's important, because yes, we need trials. If we didn't have people participate in the trials, we would not have vaccines for the COVID. And so I am very thankful for every person who rolled up their sleeve and took those vaccines without knowing what the side effects may be. When you're going into a trial, your doctor will reach out to your sponsor will reach out to the doctor, and they will talk about the risk benefits of the ones that you can participate in. And then you'll have to sit down and look at those risk benefits. That is a personal thing that you're going to have to look at, and your family, and how it's going to affect you physically and mentally and financially. So yes, there's great benefits. There wouldn't be the treatments we have for myeloma now
Right.
had people not sit down and say, I'm going to participate in this trial. It is a it's a huge, I think people should wear, there's a badge of honor for people who participate in trials. And I wish we can get more people to do that.
Yeah.
It's a personal decision.
Yeah. We've had a couple of thoughts come in as you shared, and that was beautiful, Diana. Thank you for your
Mhm.
genuine answer, because I think that's what we need to hear versus just the happy-go-lucky, everyone should do it answer. Thanks for your thoughts about sharing. This is from one of the attendees. Thank you for sharing your thoughts about the lack of people of color in trials, especially when we know that myeloma affects African Americans more. However, they feel that little is being done about the lack of representation of the true population living with myeloma, meaning very old people, people with organ dysfunctions, very high ECOG score, who are usually excluded from trials. So, is this changing, or how can we help this lack of representation?
There are hospitals that are beginning to open up, formulate, and put together di- areas. There are directors now that are, their main goal is to reach out to people of color, minorities, uh, to help them to participate in clinical trials because they know the benefit. And we're seeing we're having, our country is, and people are paying the cost of not being included or know how to be included in some of the trials. And again, I think it's going to be going forward. It's going to be very personal to all of the people who have patients of myeloma, because with COVID, it may not ever go away. And we may be fighting COVID-19, 2026, whatever they're going to be. Um, and it's frightening going forward. And we know that the vaccines are not presenting the coverage or the protections that it will in people without myeloma, and probably people with other cancers as well. So there are going to be ongoing trials, there are going to be ongoing studies into this. And so a lot of these centers are reaching out, going into the community to educate people. And it's a very cultural, there's a cultural base as to why a lot of people do not participate in cultural and in clinical trials, cultural, as well as education and access to the information. So there are centers that are trying to bridge that gap. And I think with this, and being in this period with COVID, I think that's going to be something that's going to be very in the forefront of a lot of not only our pharmaceutical biotech industries, even local doctors' offices are beginning to understand the necessity for that. And this is not something that's going to go over, one medicine. That's, we found that there are many uses for different types of treatment. Um, you might find a treatment that's been approved for myeloma, but they're finding it may be beneficial to other types of cancer, like pancreatic cancer
Right.
or small tumor cancers or other kind of cancers, soft or heart tumor cancers. So it's not just one study is going to benefit necessarily one group of people. That's what they're looking at. That's right, their initial goal. But they're finding that it can help other people as well with different types of illnesses, different types of cancers. And if we have a lack of representation for people of color, because genetically we can be different, we respond to things different, and not just this for with treatments for heart attacks and all types of things, diabetes. Then I think that the more participation we get with people of color, minorities, then the outcomes, not just for those people of color or minorities, but for everyone. Everyone's going to be able to participate in that. And the more people get participate in a trial and it's helping more people, I think it also could possibly also lower drug cost. Um, so there's so many attributes to participate in a trial. There's a lot of hesitancy, understood, that comes in participating in a trial. But I think the more that we, as individuals, think about it, bring it up, and maybe talk to other people. If you go into your treatment, you're sitting there. A lot of times you may spend hours sitting there, and just bring up the conversation. I think it enlightens everyone, and it may prompt them to look into it more. And that at that way, that's a grassroots way of
Yeah.
getting people involved in clinical trials. And I think that can only benefit everyone.
Yeah, I agree. What about people with comorbidities? It's interesting. You mentioned, we need to see how this is affecting them, these different treatments. At the same time, sometimes because of those comorbidities, they're not allowed into the clinical trial. So how do we balance that?
I think um, there are going to be specific trials for people with more comorbidities. Um, and those could be researched on NCI on list, and maybe talk to your doctor. If you have a comorbidity like diabetes or high blood pressure, maybe some other heart problems, or maybe you have another cancer going on, they may be able to talk to you about trials. There may not be as many. I would probably guess there aren't as many trials available for you if you have some of these comorbidities, but there are trials that are going to be going on with people with comorbidities because they want to know how that affects. They want to know if there's a different treatment plan, if there's a way to increase your lifespan, increase your lifestyle. I mean, there's a lot of things out there. And don't remember, I went through 8 or 9 different types of research. Just don't look at one particular type of research.
Right.
There are many out there, several out there that could be beneficial to you and your lifestyle and help your treatment plan.
Awesome. Yeah, I think you've given a great overview today. We do have time for a couple more questions if anyone wants to pitch in, but I really appreciate it. And I'm glad that you brought that up because I wanted to highlight at the very beginning when you went through all the different types of trials. Lots of times we think like, oh, you just participate in a trial to see if this new drug is going to be approved. But there's also things like you were saying genetically, they want to see how does it affect this genetic group versus the other one, or um, remind me of a couple more um, types of clinical trials.
There are. Well, let me go back to that
Yeah,
screen if I
let's
can.
go back. If you could just read those off again, I think it would be great to highlight those one more time, just so we're aware of. Sometimes we think clinical trials one size fits all, but there's many different types.
Okay, there are. Where are they? Where are they? Where are they?
Sorry, I'm putting you on the spot.
Yes, you are. You are.
I can even go back and find them if you
Yes,
want.
you could, because I have so many things on here.
I got you. Okay. I I put you on the spot, therefore I'm going to do it. So the first one is treatment research, which generally involves an intervention such as medication, psychotherapy, new devices, or new approaches to surgery or radiation therapy. The second is prevention research, which looks for better ways to prevent disorders from developing or returning. Some of these study preventions may include vitamins, medications, vaccines, minerals, or lifestyles. I'll give an example of that we see in the smoldering myeloma world right now. We see quite a few prevention research trials going on with fitness and nutrition, seeing if those type of lifestyles can prevent myeloma progression or help prevent. There's diagnostic research trials, which refer to the practice of looking for better ways to identify a particular disorder or condition, which this one was new to me. I wasn't aware of this type before this meeting today. Screening research, which aims to find the best ways to detect certain disorders or health conditions. Quality research, which explores ways to improve comfort and quality of life for individuals with a chronic illness. Genetic research, which aims to improve prediction of disorders, via gene identification and illness relation. And it looks at how a person's genes can make them more or less likely to develop a disorder. This research may lead to novel tailor-made treatments based on a patient's genetic makeup. And we're actually going to have this Friday an event on a diagnostic test as a result of genetic research. And epidemiological studies is the last group. which seeks to identify a pattern, cause, or control of disorders in groups of people. So just wanted to share that one more time because I think it's fascinating. Again, I learned from that list that there are so many different types of clinical trials, and familiarize yourself with those and decide which one you're interested in and what trials are available to you that you qualify for in those categories. We don't have any more questions come in, so we're going to finish up now. Thank you again, Diana, for your time. That was excellent. I think it was a great presentation. I'm excited to study it more after we finished here. I jumped back to the beginning in order to read, so hopefully you're not dizzy as I rush through these. Thank you all for your participation as well with your different questions and your support by being here today. And we're excited to see you next month on July 6th at 1 p.m. Eastern. We'll be discussing the difference between federal, or we'll be discussing how to understand federal, state, and private Social Security programs, which are different. And I didn't know that. So I'm excited that Diana is going to give us insight on that. There are several upcoming events in the Myeloma Crowd community. I'll highlight a few. This Wednesday is Finding Your Peace through Qigong. Qigong is a system of coordinated body posture and movement, breathing, and meditation used for the purpose of health, spirituality, and even martial arts training. So I'm excited for this one as we have Master Rick come and teach us. Then, as I was mentioning, Friday, June 4th at 1 p.m. Eastern, we'll hear from Skyline DX, their representatives in our relapsed and refractory myeloma chapter. They're going to be talking about how they utilized precision diagnostics to identify high-risk myeloma at diagnosis and at relapse. The 8th is our SoCal myeloma community chapter. We'll be hearing from multiple myeloma specialist, Dr. Amrita Krishnan. The 10th, we have two events. The first is our stem cell transplant chapter. We'll be talking about what diet to study, or what diet should follow a stem cell transplant. And then on that evening will be our myeloma caregiver chapter. We're going to be talking about the caregiver's care team. We will be interactively creating resources together in order to build our own care teams as caregivers. Recent studies have shown that due to not taking care of themselves, a high percentage of caregivers end up with worse health than when they began caregiving. We want to avoid this at all costs. So we hope that you will invite your caregivers, or if you're a caregiver yourself, you'll be attending this on June 10th. The link to sign up for any of those events and even more events that I have not mentioned today are found at the bottom of this slide, and they will be sent out in the follow-up email within 48 hours of the event's conclusion. Thank you again to our event sponsors, Bristol Myers Squibb, Amgen Oncology, Karyopharm Therapeutics, AbbVie Adaptive Biotechnologies, Genentech, Oncopeptides, Takeda Oncology, and thank you again for helping us build a strong myeloma crowd community. We appreciate each of you and hope that you have a great rest of your day. And thank you again, Diana. Take care.